Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org. Hi, this is Bill Kenower of Author Magazine, and today I'm in Seattle, Washington with Elise Hooper, author of the Other Alcott. Elise, welcome to Author.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
All right, so Elise, let's start with you, if we can. Can you remember when you first recognized that stories were interesting to you, that you just cared about stories?
Yeah, gosh, good question. I mean, I feel like stories are deep in our DNA. I mean, I always was listening to stories. There's so many. We don't document our own childhoods the way we do now with our own kids, right?
Right.
But the few pictures I have with my grandparents and my parents, they're all, I swear, of me sitting on beds and on sofas being read to.
Being read to.
Yes, yes. So I loved listening to stories. And then I remember writing a lot of my own stories too. I remember the sketches that went along with them, the writing of them.
So right from early on, you were dialed into this.
Oh yes, absolutely.
When did you decide it's prose and it's fiction, not essays?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think when I was in college, I actually switched. I had always thought, I mean, from a very early age, I'd be an English major because I love to read and I love to write.
Right.
Well, I got to college and I remember very distinctly sitting in literature classes and thinking, I'm not sure the author really meant this. I felt like we were sometimes getting off track a little and over-analyzing things. Yes. And so...
How old were you? You were in college.
So I was in college during this.
That's exactly what I thought in college, too.
Really?
Absolutely, because I came to it from a creative writing point of view, and I thought, that's not the way I think about the stuff I write.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yes. So it was at that point, actually, that I thought, well, I'm always going to be reading and writing. I don't necessarily need people telling me to do that. So I pivoted a little and went into history, because that was something, the way I was learning history in college felt very novel to me, felt very new. And when I left college, I thought that journalism was going to be where I went.
Journalism ain't fiction writing.
No.
It's a totally different muscle.
Thing. It is. But it felt safer to me, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, it's a paycheck.
The who, what, when, and
it's much more intellectual.
And
almost.
It wasn't soul-bearing, right?
No, and it can't be. In fact, you cannot.
You need to remove yourself from the story. So my first few jobs out of college were in journalism, actually. And at a certain point, I kind of felt like I had gotten off track. I distinctly remember feeling that. And
so describe that to me. I'm off track because I think for creative people, they've got to line up action with their authentic self.
Right.
And you should know the difference between being on track and off. It's like dating the right person, the wrong, right? It's the same thing.
That chemistry,
so describe that to me.
So I had actually, I was living in San Francisco, and this was during the .com boom.
Sure.
And I was initially working as a copywriter because I love to write. And I was hired then by a consulting firm to do some writing.
Okay.
But actually then the woman who I was working on some accounts with, she was sort of overwhelmed, again, because things were just taking off in this realm. And so they pulled me into accounts because I liked working with people.
Accounts?
Yeah, like account management, actually. But I was making good money.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, they probably were paying you.
And I was living in an expensive place, and I was getting to do really neat things, so I went along with it. But all the while, I just knew it wasn't me, and it wasn't where my long term was. So my husband, at that point I got married, and my husband and I knew we needed to leave San Francisco. It was too expensive. So I was taking writing classes on the side over at Hugo House in Seattle, and just kind of biding my time and feeling kind of insecure about what am I really going to write about? Is this...
So you didn't know I want to write historical fiction.
No,
you just knew you wanted to write. You knew you wanted to be fiction.
Yeah.
You knew you wanted it to be fiction.
Yes.
That there wasn't much.
Okay. Yes. I had left journalism. Yeah, I felt good about going into a fiction realm. And then, honestly, I was just reading tons of historical fiction. And so I kind of went with the advice I've always heard, which is to write what you would want to read.
Absolutely true.
as I was looking for a story, I kind of went back to this interest I'd always had in the Alcotts, because I grew up right outside of Concord, Massachusetts, and it became exciting to me because it was two sisters, one sister living in the shadow of another sister. So I felt like, okay, this is exciting to me, two women.
Did you feel like, so I know it can be annoying when authors are asked, you know, who are you in this book? And we were talking beforehand about all fiction is memoir-ish.
Right.
But I mean, I think everybody has to come out of a shadow.
Yeah.
Man, woman.
I think so too.
You know, gay, straight. I don't think it makes any difference. So, I mean, you kind of had to come out of the shadow of like, do I want to just be this professional? Who am I?
Right.
Who am I, really?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so when I started the novel thinking I was going to write about Louisa, because she was the famous sister. She's there's so much material on her. And actually what I found was there's too much material on her. I mean, there was no room for imagination with her. But I thought back to those visits I had made to Orchard House as a kid, and there were these little pencil sketches on the wall of this back bedroom that was May Alcott, the youngest sister. And I thought, what was her story? Well, she in Little Women gets kind of a bad rap. She is the spoiled brat, really, and so I just became intrigued because I felt like there was more to her.
And so you had this, so you have found your way back from writing as a little girl back to fiction writing as a grown person. Did you have kids at that point?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I did kids with it too. But you hadn't been writing fiction all that time. And fiction is its own skill set.
Absolutely.
Right? So what was the most challenging part for you, and what came easiest?
Well, I have no problem hearing the voices in my head of these characters.
Great. Well, that's helpful.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I've become really one for driving around with a silent car just so I can kind of hear this. But for me, it was kind of learning the structure of novels and the organization and kind of the cues that as a reader, I feel like I know innately, but I hadn't really ever had them called out to me of kind of what I'm looking for as I read. So learning just about a journey, how to structure the journey of your characters was really important for me.
We were talking about literature, where you were reading literature and why you were frustrated with how it's studied. One thing it seems to me you have to learn as a published author now, and you're sharing your work, it's still relatively new, so you probably haven't heard a ton from your readers, but you'll meet them.
Right.
Is that the reader does so much work.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have that you leave so much room for the reader.
Yes.
And the idea of analyzing, because what you wrote and what they read are sometimes very different.
Right.
In certain ways.
Right. I've gone to a few book clubs so far.
You have?
Yes.
Like physically in the book?
Yes, yes.
Because they don't always like your book, just because they invited you. I know authors
I've heard
had
of that
experience.
I have heard of that. I fortunately had good experiences where what has been interesting to me, though, is that I came to writing this book first out of this fascination with the Alcotts.
Right.
I am probably a small subsection of the population who has an obsession with the Alcotts, right? So while some people are also loved Little Women and love reading about these characters kind of in a new form, a lot of people rather have loved or really identified with all the other artists in the story, because May becomes part of this community of other sculptors and painters, both in Boston and in Europe. And those women all have really great stories. So it's been very exciting to me to have readers identify with some of the other artists or just take inspiration from some of these other artists. That's been really neat and sort of unexpected for me, actually.
All right, I have one more question for you. And what I'd like you to do is finish this sentence for me.
Okay.
If writing has taught you anything, it's taught you what?
It's taught me how little I know. It's just taught me
how little you know.
How little I know. And just how much there is still to learn. And I love that. I mean, that's why I'm a teacher. I think that's what fuels creativity, for me at least, is this desire to just learn more. Absolutely.